KZN 60 minutes uhlelo kanti kuvuma FM Adult Radio for the Young at Heart. Alright, saqhubeka nohlelo namuhla kusihlwa nayo ke i-prevention and combating of hate crimes and hate speech nokusekumthetho eNingizimu Afrika osayindiweyo obviously la komongameli. Ake sizokuphawula ke la kwenhlangano i-Christian Worldview nesike sathi ukuthi nje lapha nalapha qapho ngayo sixoxa nozikalala isazi somthetho. Welcome Mr. Philip Rosenthal of Christian Worldview Vuma FM this evening.
Good evening.
Perhaps your initial reaction to the signing into law in its current form, the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill.
Well, firstly, it's bad news that the president has signed this bill because this puts Christians in danger of being prosecuted criminally for
Why is that?
Speaking up against issues which are controversial, and this bill is very vague in terms of what it defines as hate speech, so that puts us at risk. But I think this is not a point at which we are simply going to accept this and capitulate, because this bill is going to be taken to the Constitutional Court, and there are good grounds to have it overturned or at least remedied in places to fix the problems in the bill, which is what we lobbied Parliament to do for the past several years. And we hope that the court will listen to the argument that is put before it.
What are your concerns before we get to your action to have it overturned? You speak about how broad it is in terms of definitions.
Yes, that is correct. Firstly, there's several different terms in the definitions that are a problem. One of them is the definition of social harm, which we would argue is something which is overly broad, and we put in a proposal to remedy that. It wasn't accepted. Then there's the definition of hatred itself, which we believe should be narrowly defined so that it is only in extreme situations that a person would be criminally prosecuted. And then there's also the definitions, for example, of what is in the public interest. But it's also that the religious exemptions clause, which, and in fact the exemptions clause, which is more generally is currently smoke and mirrors, because there is a loophole in it by which they can interpret it in such a way that it doesn't really apply at all. So those loopholes need to be closed. And I think, but one of the important things that I think everyone needs to be aware of is that the Constitution has a number of clauses in it that are relevant to this bill, which includes the right, for example, of religious freedom, the rights of freedom of expression, the rights of religious and cultural communities, and the freedom of conscience. And it's also got a limitations clause in the Constitution, which means that the onus is on the government to motivate as to why they want to limit our rights and constrain our freedom of speech. And I don't think they're going to be able to put a good argument forward. Certainly they haven't been able to put forward a convincing argument yet. And if they do try and put forward an argument that is in the Constitutional Court, that is going to be fiercely rebutted by those who are wishing to defend freedom of speech. So we and it's not only Christians which are concerned about this. This is something which is also of concern to, for example, political parties that might have different viewpoints with the government or with from the elite that is in controlling the courts. And even people who we might totally disagree with also want their right to say things. And the only situations which we would support something like this is already made criminal by other laws. So we don't actually need this law at all.
In layman terms, in case, Mr. Rosenthal, somebody must have been lost in the legal jargon there, how will this law change how people of religious groupings have been doing things before?
Well, I think if we are obedient to the Bible, we shouldn't change anything. We should simply continue speaking the truth, and if we are prosecuted, well, then we will have to face the consequences. I apologize if I use too much legal jargon, but if I maybe try and say it again without the jargon, but the Constitution gives us a right to freedom of speech, except in some very exceptional situations. And if the government wants to limit that right to freedom of speech and say, well, we can't say something, then they need to produce very good arguments to the Constitutional Court as to why that limiting of free speech needs to happen. And so the responsibility is on the government to defend this bill, because it is taking away rights that we have from the Constitution. And I hope that they will be completely defeated, but if they are not completely defeated, then I hope that they will be at least partially defeated, and we can fix some of the problems in this bill.
So we're getting it as you're telling it to us there. Does that mean that the people who submitted along with the Christian worldview are taking the government to the Constitutional Court?
Well, okay, if I just clarify, the Christian View Network is not taking the government to the Constitutional Court, but okay, other people have expressed the intention that they will take the government to the Constitutional Court, and we will support them in that and provide them with arguments. And we will see which other organizations join in. But certainly for this, I do expect that that there will be a challenge to this, and if there's not, then it is not simply Christians who are going to have their views censored by this bill. And so there's a lot of different groupings that will want to defend their free speech against this.
In previous engagements, I'm not sure if you've been on the receiving end of being called a racist as a result of this. What are some of the positives of this law being signed, this bill being signed into law, in light of the past we have as a country and the presence of racism that is there and the spreading of it on social media platforms and in public places?
Okay, well, the situation is that there is already law which by which a person, if they make, for example, a racial insult against somebody else, that they can firstly be sued for defamation, and secondly, they can be prosecuted for crimen injuria, which is a severe criminal insult to somebody, and that has happened in South African law. So we don't need an additional law which would do this, but the proposed law would put a risk of up to 5 years in jail for a set of very vague categories of offences, and so the thing is that I can't see a legitimate need for this to have two laws that say the same thing, but the vague wording in this law can allow prosecution of legitimate speech, and it can also lead to people being just afraid to speak up because they don't want to have to be facing a potential criminal charge. I mean, we had, for example, I think that in Durban, an evangelist, Simeon Chetty, who spoke up in favor of conversion from
one religion to another.
One religion to another. And the other religion was offended by this, and they then brought a claim for R1 million damages. And now, thankfully, that was settled out of court, and they resolved the matter. But it would be even more serious if they then brought a charge where they wanted somebody to be the same person to not only pay R1 million damages but go to jail for 5 years. That would be a much harsher penalty and would have a much more chilling effect. But no, this is not at all needed to curb racism. There are already laws which protect people in that situation. There's civil law, there's defamation, which is you can't just go and slander somebody, you can't just go and insult somebody. So you have to be careful how you say things. But this is a much broader thing, and it's got, for example, things that it talks about social harm. Now, what is social harm? I don't know what social harm is, and so anybody can say, well, your viewpoint is socially harmful.
Social harm.
And but what is positive is that they did make some changes to the bill as a result of our lobbying. So, for example, they used to have something in there which was called cultural harm, and they've taken that out. I don't know what cultural harm is, but whatever it was, they've taken it out, which I'm pleased about, and we can try now to get them to take out some of these words like social harm, which nobody knows what they mean. And because nobody knows what they mean, it means that it depends what judge you get and what that judge thinks.
And it's provocative. That's one thing we can, and contagious and contentious. That's one thing we can agree upon. Well, I hope our engagement this evening hasn't caused anybody or you social harm, Mr. Rosenthal. Thank you for your time this evening.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
We're speaking to Philip Rosenthal of a grouping Christian Worldview. Bangabanye ke labo ababhala bephikisana nezingxenye zomthetho ikakhulukazi incazelo zezinto ezingaba ukuphula umthetho mawuzenzile. Speech that causes social harm is one of them. Masesibuye itolo sokhuluma nehawu ekhala ngesimo sabasebenzi abasebenza ngaphansi kwazo emamoshwali kulesifundazwe soKwaZulu Natal. Isaphu yona nokunyona amaphoyisa ekhala ngokushiya kwamaphoyisa asagogotile kwezinye zezingxenye including ubseshi that are living for greener pastures. Stay with us.
OG Nights with Linda Mr. OG Ndimande.
From Monday Man to Impandom Africa with Nkosinathi Zulu.
Isintu sithi indoda kumele ithotshelwe umfazi wayo. Yona kumele ithande, inakekele, ivikele umkayo nabatwana. Uma ngabe indoda ekhaya ingasahlonishwa kusuke kukhomba lokuthi khona into wrong la ekhaya.
Khona umuntu edumile kuthiwa amaZulu ayashaya. Engathi thina asina umthetho osigayidayo.
Umlando wethu uyaveza ukuthi importance yomuntu wesifazane kwaZulu akashawa ngisho empini kuliwa ngendlela umuntu wesifazane ohlonishwa ngayo kwaZulu. Njengamanje sesibona abantu besifazane sebegcwelezwa kanje sesikhathe iconnection nezimpilo zethu zikamoya.
OG Nights with Linda Mr. OG Ndimande.